he was notable in, I would say, April, May, the turn of the weather that, can really begin to be the initiator of sort of some ground offensives. We talked about those gains that the Russians seem to be making around Kharkiv, and then all the pro-Kremlinites were like, oh, Russia's going to sweep them. And suddenly they've gone very quiet, and there's not much really happening up there. How much is that, do you think, to do with the cross-border strikes into and around Belgorod? Or is it more to do with the fact that the Ukrainian defensive lines within Ukraine
Everything.
have been
Russia can't get armored vehicles to Vovchansk without them being blown up on the way there. It's not just military aid from the United States. It's the Czech-led artillery initiative. They've already received close to 100,000 rounds this month. They're going to start receiving 100,000 extra rounds every month for the foreseeable future. But then it's also Ukraine's insane domestic production of these cheap FPV drones, costing $400 or $500 per unit.
Wow.
These drones are everywhere. I mean, these drones are the absolute nightmare. When you see these recorded videos of Russians, they're not sleeping too great because they've already seen a buddy or two get blown up by a kamikaze FPV drone. So these FPV drones, they go after absolutely everything. Everything that moves is a target. But yeah, Russia can't even get armored vehicles to Vovchansk to help them in the city because they get blown up before they even get close. I think Ukraine is on the right path. I think they've found a winning formula. Their ability to get these drones and these components and assemble them and get them to the front is a lot better than the Russian side because Russia is still restricting access to the internet because they don't want their soldiers talking to people. They don't want their soldiers to have smartphones because then they can record videos or call their loved ones at home. So Ukraine has a huge leg up, Starlink being one, but the ability to use their phones and the internet and technology to communicate and coordinate, this is something the Russian military still does to control information, to keep their soldiers in line. It's a slave army.
What about this claim from the Russians that they do make incremental gains, across a specific city? Sort of literally, we're talking about centimeter, but it's a symbolic or Pyrrhic victory, I think, really. But what do we make of these claims suddenly? Are we beginning to see potentially a reorientation again by the Russian forces to try to claim more around Bakhmut and forget the northeast again? Are they spreading themselves too thinly, added with all the points you've made about the Ukrainian advantages now? How do you look at it from the Russian perspective in trying to make gains elsewhere?
I know some of my colleagues on YouTube, every single map update that occurs on Deep State Live, they show it, but it doesn't matter. Every time Russia captures a mailbox, they pound their chests and they spike the football and they say, we're winning. Look, we just took this single wheat field. Yeah, we lost 300 tanks and 2,000 personnel over 4 months to take this wheat field, but we took it. That means we're winning. The map doesn't matter because, yes, every square inch of Ukrainian land is sovereign and it matters to Ukraine. But big picture, long arc, the real war map is Russia's treasury. The war will end when Russia runs out of money. In 2012, Putin came back into power and he sent Russia into austerity mode to save up $600 billion over the last 12 years. To get ready for this war. And the money wasn't to fight the war. He saved up $600 billion to ensure that Russia could survive sanctions for the rest of his life. Putin's an idiot. He didn't tell his financial advisors what he was going to do. So half this money was being stored in Western banks. It was frozen. But Putin still had a war chest starting at about $300 billion. When you think about, the United States is allocated $60 billion, the UK is allocated $60 billion, Finland is allocated $3.5 billion or whatever. Stack that money up compared to Russia's starting war chest of 300. And that's the real battle. That's the real map. Putin is spending. More tanks, more bombs, more jets, more air defense systems need to be made. And we've got to pay our soldiers. We actually have to pay them, which I'm sure is very humiliating for a czar. But it's the only way to get Russians to sign these contracts. So it's a huge sugar rush for the Russian economy. All of these wives of Russian soldiers in these small Siberian towns getting a $2,000 paycheck every month. It's not the guy sitting in a trench in Donetsk who's benefiting from these salaries. It's the children, the wives, and the elders of these impoverished Russian towns. But inflation is going crazy. Labor shortages in Russia, because they don't have enough people to do the work, is driving up labor costs. On top of that, sanctions. Russia can still get everything they want, but if you can't legitimately buy stuff from Western companies, there's going to be a 100%, a 200%, 300% markup to get it through Central Asia or Turkey or the Maldives or whatever. So Russia is hemorrhaging cash. On paper, their GDP is still growing. It looks booming at the moment. But inflation year over year in Russia is horrendous. It's got to be in the 22 or 24%. We're on year 3 of war, and if you ever want to pull out an exponential formula and put in 20% inflation a year, Russians are feeling this at the gas pumps. They're feeling this in the grocery stores, and it's only going to get worse next year and the year after if they continue this war.